use covers practices that are inconsistent with sound government, business, or medical practices that result in unnecessary costs, improper payment, or payment for services
Yeah.
that fail to meet professional standards of care,
Yeah.
or that are medically unnecessary.
Basics of hand hygiene.
I usually don't eat because I know that fryers, as a vegetarian, they use fish oil and that shit. So I usually stay away from those things. Right. And it did taste like fish oil. So yes, I did not eat another one.
Basics of hand hygiene.
It was totally fish. Fish oil.
About this course. Every day you encounter harmful germs that are capable of making you and others in your environment sick. So how do you protect yourself and others from these harmful germs? By following proper infection control practices. Hand hygiene is the single most important infection control measure to prevent the spread of germs. The goal of this course is to instruct all employees about when hand hygiene is necessary, as well as the correct procedure for hand washing and the use of alcohol-based hand rubs. The information provided in this course follows the most recent hand hygiene guidelines published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, unless otherwise stated. However, your employer may have hand hygiene policies that differ from the guidelines presented in this course, so it is important for you to be familiar with your employer's policies. Learning objectives. After taking this course, you should be able to identify situations in which hand hygiene is necessary, demonstrate the correct procedure for hand washing and the use of an alcohol-based hand rub, ABHR. Section 2, Hand Hygiene.
Thank you for calling the Compliance Hotline. How can I help you?
When to perform. Hand hygiene is a general term that describes hand washing using soap and water or the use of an alcohol-based hand rub, ABHR, to destroy harmful pathogens such as bacteria or viruses on the hands. You should always perform hand hygiene when you arrive for work and when you leave for the day, before applying and after removing personal protective equipment, for example, gloves. Before and after providing any type of care, before moving from a soiled body site to a clean body site, after touching a patient or their immediate environment, after contact with blood, bodily fluids, or other potentially contaminated surfaces. ABHRs are the most effective products for reducing the number of germs on the hands of healthcare providers. Because of this, ABHRs are the preferred method for cleaning your hands in most clinical situations. However, you must always wash your hands with soap and water if they are visibly dirty or contaminated with blood or other potentially infectious materials, OPIM. If a sink is not close by, you may decontaminate your hands with an ABHR, but you must wash them with soap and water as soon as possible. In addition, you must.
All right. So when leading groups in this coronavirus era, you've got it. There's a lot of stuff with the hand washing. I've led different groups that we kind of cut out during COVID, like the morning group at hospice and the I want to call it the grievance counselor group. But those are just some examples. So that is some of it. And I had a few with understanding groups from Dr. Kaplan, but I wanted to give y'all a chance for, oh yeah, go bring your own mask. Like at hospice, they had us put on the full gear, like these suits and like cover-ups, because it started getting bad in the middle of COVID. They also gave us a face plate, a face mask, and like the shield that goes over everything too. So that was interesting. But I did have one other one on groups I wanted to get with you guys before I finish today. Let me see here. They moved us rooms on Wednesday, and they might move me again on Monday, but today she's not kicking me out. So that's good. This will be the third time we've been moved since this has started. Okay, so yeah, there was something on group dynamics, and then also the group polarization, but I don't want it to be too long because some of these are super long. Shoot. I think it is the group polarization one, so let me get that. There it is. Okay.
All right, so let's talk about these concepts of social facilitation, social loafing, and group polarization. So when we talk about social facilitation, you are being influenced by others, right? So when we have a person who is considered to be an expert at their craft, and other people are watching them, they actually perform better. So being watched leads to improved performance, right? So athletes like Michael Jordan, when the stage got larger, his performance got better. So that gave a sense of improvement of function. Now, there are times when if a person is not an expert at their craft, or it's a really complex task, the presence of others could actually cause damage to performance. So social facilitation only works when it's an easy task or you're a content expert. That's going to improve performance. So a good example is if we were to look at home field advantage in sports, right? And this is an old study from 1992, but it tells us the point I'm trying to make, where if we were to look at different sports, the winning percentage of the home team is notably above 50%. And even baseball, where you have a large number of games in a season, so it's a larger sample size, it's still 53%. And it goes up with different sports. So when it comes to basketball and soccer, it's over 60%, right? So 64 and 69%. That should tell you, right? So the power of the home team. Now we're dealing with experts in their sports, and we're dealing with an audience behind them. So having an audience behind them actually improves their performance. Now, social loafing is where in a group setting, people perform poorer. Now, social loafing is when individuals are put in a group, they tend to work less hard than when they're working by themselves. So when we pool their work together, they perform not as well. And there was a famous study where they blindfolded people and told them that they were engaging in a tug of war experiment. And they weren't told whether, no, pardon me, I take that back. Some people were told they were pulling alone, and some people were told they're pulling with other people. And the strength by which people pulled on average was stronger than when they were alone than when they were pulling as a group. So we see group contributions or group performance. There are people who slack off, and for many of you, you probably hate group projects because a lot of people will just kick it and you might have one or two people in a group working really hard and everyone else, taking advantage of their work. So that's social loafing. Putting people in groups, you lose performance. There is a way to get out of it, though. If you assign specific tasks to each member of the group so that you can evaluate each individual in the group, that social loafing goes away. But again, social facilitation, improved performance based on being observed or being part of a larger group of people. Social loafing is when put in groups, individual performance tends to decrease when it's not being evaluated. Now, there are also other effects of group interaction. So we have, let's say you had a political debate, right? And you took a person who's very far to the left and very far to the right. And we had them engage in a discussion. And we would ask them to rate their strength of belief in their argument before the discussion and ask them to rate their strength of belief in the argument after the discussion. What we would find is after debating a person or discussing a political point with a person, the opinions become more extreme. So the person who's far to the left, their opinions will become more leftist, and the people who are far to the right, will become more to the right. So that's what we call group polarization. So oftentimes when you debate a person, it's rare that they say, oh, you know what? You have a really good point. I changed my mind, right? It's rare. People tend to, become more entrenched in their position. Now, another issue is what's called groupthink. Now, when you have groupthink, you put a group together to make a decision. You would think that the more minds in the room, the better the decision making would be. However, we see when there is a charismatic leader or general consensus, you're more likely to go with the group. And if we were to look at the invasion of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs situation, Kennedy followed his cabinet, and it was bad advice to invade Cuba. But he followed that because everybody was in consensus. So, good leaders and good teams, you want to seek dissent. You want to seek positions that are opposite of yours to make a better decision. But when there's uniformity, it's easy to get swept away and make bad decisions. So here is another example of group polarization. So if you ask people to rate their prejudice, you have a low prejudice group and a high prejudice group. And then you have some interaction between people who have high prejudice and low prejudice. Their position becomes more extreme. So if we were to look at the difference between the low and high prejudice group before the discussion, it's about 5 points. But it goes to about 6.5 points difference after a discussion. So we're not likely to win someone over if they have an extreme opinion. You're going to make them more entrenched in their position, not the other way around. So there's also the influence of the individual. So everything I've talked to you now is about social control, right? So how large groups of people or the situation influences you. But what about your role? What about your power to affect the group as a whole? Well, we refer to that as your personal control. So you have what's called minority influence. You have the ability to stand out and lead people in a different direction. So there are individuals who can sway a majority. Now, obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but if you think of Mahatma Gandhi or Dr. King or Princess Diana, these were individuals, but they were able to move millions of people to a particular mindset, to a particular goal. So just because the group has one point of view, that doesn't mean you have to go with it. You can push back, you can sway the group. And a good example on our Supreme Court was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Her famous words are, "I dissent," right? I dissent. And because she disagreed, she had tremendous influence on the court, forcing the court not to just go with a rubber stamp in one way or another. And you too can be that minority influence if you so choose. So let's stop there. Now we'll continue with our lecture, but this is a good place to press pause.
Finding a new career can be an exciting and eye-opening experience. Join us.
So yeah, the goods and the bads of the group. Sometimes you'll get different thoughts and opinions and different ideas to work with the group. And then one of the bads being that you could have low.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Daniel Kaplan and welcome to my channel. I'm a clinical psychologist and I've been a professor for over 15 years now here in New York City. What you're gonna find on my channel are videos related to clinical psychology, psychotherapy, personality theory, human development, research.
So here's some of the
everybody,
dynamics.
welcome back to the group therapy course. In this lesson, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about group dynamics. Group dynamics, or what you might hear referred to as process variables. And group dynamics or group process variables are factors within a person that could influence group outcomes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. I have to pull it up. And we're going to go through it. All right. So when we talk about group dynamics, 1 second. I just adopted a kitten. So my kitten's going to steal the show. All right, so in concept, so group dynamics are, as I said, factors within a person or within the group that impact how we relate to one another. So when we think about it, the structure of the group, it guides interaction among group members. We also look at the social process by which people interact with the group environment. And we look at factors such as personality, power, and behaviors, individual behaviors, group behaviors, as well as group leader functioning and how that plays a role. So when we talk about group dynamics, there are different kind of behaviors at play. Now, I will say that I am using slides that I did not write. This comes from a training I went to on group dynamics, so you'll notice that they have the British spelling of behaviors. But in any event, I wanted to, give credit and not take credit for someone else's intellectual property. All right. So task behaviors. So when we talk about the goals of the group, you have initiating. Initiating is a task behavior. Initiating that which is needed for the group to move forward. Information seeking, right? So gathering information or information giving, providing information to other members of the group. Clarification is a group dynamic, clarifying ideas, bringing closure, and then consensus testing. Consensus testing, I believe, in an exercise in the class group, we did an exercise on consensus testing just to see where we are with the topic. Basically, that's just polling the group and seeing where everyone is at. We also have other behaviors such as maintenance behaviors, so keeping the status quo or keeping things going, right? So maintenance is maintaining the group cohesion. Could be encouraging as a factor that could promote group cohesion. Thinking about how to improve the group atmosphere, harmonizing, thinking about how to blend together, how to work together in a reasonable, peaceful way, compromising, right? So that's a biggie when we think about group dynamics. We don't all have to agree as a group, right? So, and there are different kinds of groups. There might be work groups, there might be group therapy, and task groups. We talked about this in, I guess it was the first lesson, but compromising is important when the group is of two minds, where some people think one thing and another group of people think a different way. So ultimately, you might go in the direction of the majority, but that doesn't mean that those who are in the minority lose their voice. They might have to compromise, but they also still should be validated insofar as, you know, their experience, even though it was not the prevailing position, they still have rights. And gatekeeping is deciding what goes and what goes through. The kind of conversation we have, these are gatekeeping activities. It's basically what you allow to continue, what you don't allow to continue. So when we talk about the group task, there are a whole host of group tasks, and a person can assume one of these roles within a group, but they can also assume more than one role. So they can be an initiator, contributor. So in that context, they might start a dialogue off. We talked about gathering information, information seeking, information giving. They might offer opinions, right? So, or seek opinions from others. They might elaborate. They might elaborate is to expand upon. They might be a coordinator within the group, an orienter, an evaluator, an energizer. Now, an evaluator is one who weighs the experiences of others. Now, you will see people will offer their opinion on one another once they feel safe. So that is something to be concerned with, how you offer opinion. Energizer is doing more of encouraging and mobilizing other people, or helping other people mobilize, I should say. Procedural technician, that's usually the group leader who guides the procedural direction, and the recorder is the person who takes note. there's no formal note taking other than session notes from the group leader. But a recorder might be like, well, in a previous session, you said this, and they're bringing back to your attention some of the things that were stated earlier. So we talked about task behavior, we talked about maintenance behavior, but it's also important to talk about self-interested behavior, because if the other behaviors help you grow and lead towards group cohesion, these kind of behaviors are going to actually undermine the group process or the group dynamics. So being overly controlling or dominating, that could be the group leader or the member. By the way, all of these behaviors can be manifested by any member of the group, whether it be the group leader or whether it be a group member. So you don't want to, dominate the conversation or overly control the conversation as a group leader. You want to let things go. And as a group member, you also don't want to dominate or be overly controlling. We talked about compromise, right? Compromising is sort of like the flip side of dominating and controlling. So if compromising will help maintain group cohesion, dominating and controlling will interfere with it. Blocking we talked about as a micro skill. It's important to block inappropriate behaviors. But that is doing a cutoff if you're the group leader. There's another form of blocking where you don't allow the process to go, right? And that could be negative. So someone who derails the conversation or abruptly changes the conversation when someone's about to have an insight, that's a more negative form of blocking. Manipulating is self-explanatory. Trying to work on one of your hidden agendas and getting other people to go with your hidden agenda, that would be manipulating. Belittling is self-explanatory. When offering constructive feedback or constructive criticism, we don't attack people. And then splitting hairs is you might have people who argue all over things, but it's based on such a granular level, such a small, minute level that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, but they're like pecking at little things or splitting hairs. So they're, going to such a granular level to create discord. All right, so splitting hairs, you might hear people say, oh, we're arguing over semantics. If you're arguing over semantics, it's likely that someone is splitting hairs. All right. Now, there are different factors that impact group dynamics. So there are norms that are expected of people. There are roles within the group, and status can play a role. In terms, those are structural factors of group dynamics. And then you have functional factors, which is cohesiveness, which is really what I focus on the most, is making sure the group is working as a unit, because that cohesiveness is what's going to bring you to a functional working group. Social loafing, where some people within the group are working, other people are relying on others. So the best way to describe social loafing is think about group projects. And there's always one person who does more of the work, and there might be a person who doesn't do their share, and they coast on the progress of the group. So social loafing happens in group therapy too, where the group as a whole is moving on, but you're coasting on their effort. So you have to pay attention to make sure that everybody is indeed contributing to the group. And then you have to pay attention to conflict, right? I think it's important to know that not all conflict is bad. I think I've said this in a series of lectures on group therapy, but with conflict comes intimacy. So you have to pay attention to general group conflict, but then interpersonal conflict between several individuals within the group. All right. So those are the types of group dynamics. Now we have to talk about factors or exchange theory. Exchange theory comes really out of economics and economics theories about weighing the cost and the benefit. So according to exchange theory, these are going to affect the group norms and the group effectiveness, but everybody is weighing the cost or the effort involved, the reward that's received, and the ratio between the reward and the cost. So that is what exchange. So it's cost benefit analysis, and most people want to maximize benefit and minimize the cost or effort. So in general, you have to pay attention to that, and how one determines their general approach is based on what society expects of them, their past experiences, based on cost, effort, reward, what they've seen, and alternative ways to get to that outcome, right? So all of these play a role. So we said there are different structural factors. One of those factors is related to group norms. So group norms are standards of acceptable behavior. They could be formal or informal, right? So formal norms are that which was stated. As mentioned, many people have a pre-group meeting, and in the pre-group meeting, they state their expectations of the group. But there are implicit or informal norms as well, right? So ultimately, what the group norms do is there are expectations of the group, from the group, and about the group, about how the group should function. So those are collectively held expectations. In group norms, why do we have norms? Why do we have expectations? Is because it allows for predictability. It allows for adequate functioning and appropriate functioning within a group. Now, whether you're from one group, or whether you're part of one group or another group, or you're part of one community or another, or a society, they may differ across groups, but all groups have group norms. You know, think about society. There are expectations of you in our culture, and you know, if you deviate from them, then you run the risk of adverse consequence, right? Doesn't mean that the norms in a Western or US society are better. They might differ, they're different, but if you go to another place, they have their own norms and expectations in society. And if you deviate from those, you run the risk of adverse consequence. So, when we talk about types of norms, there's prescriptive and proscriptive norms. So a prescriptive norm is basically an expectation about what is supposed to be done. So like a prescription. A proscriptive norm is what is not supposed to be done. So the difference between prescriptive and proscriptive. Now, there are different types of norms. There are norms about appearance, right? So when you give a presentation or when you're on a job interview, there are appearance norms. You have to dress in a suit or, dress the part. Performance norms are expectations related to what you say or what you do. And if you don't say, how you handle not sharing within a group. And then allocation of resources and arrangement norms. So an allocation of resource would be if a group is working, you might clarify that, you're not always going to be able to provide everyone with the same amount of attention, depending on the conversation. So, but across the span of the group, it will be more balanced. So you talk about resources within and across sessions, and then you have arrangement norms. So an arrangement norm is contingency, a consequence of, violating a norm. So in terms of cohesiveness, is how attracted or bonded one is to another person, how motivated you are to stay within a group, right? So if there's group cohesion, you're going to be more connected to the group and want to stay within a group. Whether you share a common goal, whether you have common values, all of these factors are going to affect group cohesion. Now, so here is just a model of factors that impact group cohesion or cohesiveness and some of the consequences of it. So group size, and we talked about, the magical number of 8 to 12 is roughly what groups are today. But the larger the group, it affects group cohesion, right? So that's going to result in diversity of opinions, which could be fine, and how you handle that's going to be fine. There might be competition for attention and resources, and differing views on group identity. And then you have issues with relative success, right? All of these impact group cohesion. Now, that group cohesion or cohesiveness is going to dictate how much a person participates, right? So think about group size. The larger the group, the level of participation goes down. The smaller the group and the more homogeneous the group is, right? The more likely you're going to have conformity, right? When you talk about group identity versus, individual identity and that competition, that's going to either increase or decrease the relative emphasis on group goals versus personal goals. And then, success and so forth. You get the idea. I just went down and showed how going across 1-to-1 could impact the group. All right. Now we talked about status. Now, if there's differences in status within a group, that is going to impact group cohesion or group cohesiveness. So, ideally, no person should be given a position superior to the other. And in the groups that I run, I make it clear that I'm a participant observer, which means that for the time of the group, I'm not superior to anyone. I'm just another person within the group. Now, granted, there is an implicit difference because I am the group leader and they are paying me. But I want to reduce as much of the status difference as possible to make sure that we can work together and there's no threat there. Now, the more differences you have in status, the more you run the risk of having hierarchies within the group, and having classes or hierarchies within a group is going to result in greater conflict amongst group members. So, how do we improve group cohesion? Here are some factors that could improve group cohesion. Make smaller groups, right? So, make the groups small enough that everyone can contribute and can't hide, right? The larger the group, the more a person can fade out, but not too small where there's too much of a spotlight on any one person. Encourage agreement with group goals. So some of the discussions you have is, well, what do you want to get out of group, right? So in group settings, it's important to discuss that so that the group knows the direction they're going to take, because without a clear goal amongst the group, you're going to flounder, you're going to struggle. Increasing the time members spend together is important, right? So the longer the group runs, the more people bond. In fact, you know, when we talked about open groups that don't have a specific endpoint, people can stay for years, but you see them really bonded to one another. Increasing the status of the group as a whole, right, is going to be important. Encouraging healthy debate and competition of ideas, and then rewarding the whole group, not any individual member, or praising the whole group, not any individual member. So in group therapy, this is, that was a great group, everyone. I see how hard everyone worked, rather than saying, you know, Dan, thank you for sharing today. You know, that was really, really great of you, right? So that might affect other members who didn't get the praise. So conflict, again, conflict is, you know, healthy and normal. It provides a sense of intimacy, but here's the deal. Conflict occurs more when there's not enough resources for everyone to get what they want. So there's going to be a battle for attention, a battle for approval, a battle for prevailing ideas, and so forth. So people will compete. Now, so the goals of the group, the needs of the group, there can be conflict, the ideas, the values, and attitudes. I think I said some of that already. There can be competition. Behaviors that are linked to conflict is competing, which is self-explanatory, where people are at each other to sort of win against one another. Avoiding, right? Not doing what you're supposed to within a group. Those are oftentimes considered the more negative aspects of conflict behaviors, but compromising, accommodating, and collaborating are the positive side. So if you work through the conflict, these three factors are going to help you be successful. Now, sources of conflict could be prejudice. So everybody has implicit biases. Everybody has prejudices. Now, prejudice and racism are not always the same thing, but a prejudice is just a negative attitude towards an individual based on their belongingness to a particular group or section of society. So prejudice is your attitude, discrimination is your behavior, right? And so discrimination would be treating people differently based on your prejudice. And then social categorization, the us versus them, it's the in-group versus the out-group. That's what that is. We're going to always show favor to those who are more similar to us, and we're going to show negative biases and prejudices versus those who we categorize as the out-group or the them. So we want to enhance our personal identity, or, you know, those who are more similar to us, and we want to castigate or push aside those who are different. And this has both biological and social roots, right? So nature and nurture at play with this. So that is, you know, a very brief lecture on group process. Now, there are other behaviors. We talked about problematic behaviors in group. Those are also group dynamic variables, and that's important to say. So if you go to an earlier lecture in this series, you'll hear a discussion on some of the other problematic behaviors. So I'm going to stop there, though, and until next time, take care.
All right, everybody.
And
See
we're back in
you
third quarter
Monday.
planning.
We might be
Adam,
close for the
quarterbacking
eclipse
this
stuff.
project, and she's looking